Welcome to our training on advocacy and choice for service coordinators and case managers in New Hampshire. This training is sponsored by the New Hampshire State Department of Health and Human Services. This course is designed for service coordinators and case managers who work with people with intellectual disabilities, acquired brain disorder, and as well as the aging and physical disabilities. We are also going to be reviewing a little bit about the HCBS settings rule. So what we're hoping to accomplish by the end of this training is we want you to be able to identify the differences between informed choice and choice. And we're also going to review some items that will allow you to describe the legal and ethical responsibilities of case managers and service coordinators and how they align with self-determination and autonomy. We'd like you to be able to identify how to advocate and provide some strategies to really build self-advocacy skills on a day-to-day basis. You'll also be able to define how to ensure a person's choices are included in the person-centered planning process itself when you're building that individual service agreement or care plan. We're going to provide a description of supported decision-making, that process, and help you learn what that is. And then before we finish, we'll touch on some strategies to overcome some of the obstacles that exist in our regular practice so that we can ensure that people continue to have access and build their skills around self-advocacy and experiences of choice. So when we refer to advocacy and choice, it's all about empowering a person to make decisions about their lives, decisions about services and supports. Advocacy and choice promotes dignity, self-determination, and quality of life. It means using person-centered approaches to ensure a person's preferences and needs and values are at the center of service delivery. And it means encouraging the person to express their goals and their preferences. So decision-making is a natural part of all of our lives. It's something we do throughout our lives, and we get better at it over time. It's nice to think about decision-making as actually a skill, something that we learn from our choices. We make mistakes, we learn how to do things better. Think about the early experiences that you have early in your life. Some of those decisions you probably wouldn't make again because you made some mistakes or you experienced some things that you're now in reflection able to say, oh, I'm not going to do that again. When I think about, for example, my experiences in buying a car, when I was first buying a car, I was using a lot of different kind of supports to do that. I relied on a lot of different supports. And that's another aspect of decision making throughout our lives. We get support for that. So when I was first buying a car, I relied on my parents or my father for giving me advice based on his own experience, right? And he made recommendations for where I could find a dealer that was, a good person to purchase things from. I also relied on my friends. I looked to my peers because I wanted to buy a car that was going to make me look cool, and be able to really stand out in terms of my peer group. I also did some research, looked for some records on repair and so on. So those are different sources of support. It changed over time. When I'm buying a car later in my life, I didn't rely on those same sources. It got stronger in certain areas, and other things became important to me. So decision making is something that happens throughout our life. It's a skill that we become stronger at. We need experience and exposure in order for that skill to be able to be developed. And thinking about what support somebody needs is perfectly natural. So when we're thinking about supporting people that we serve as a case manager or service coordinator, we know that there are some areas that they need support in. They might have trouble understanding and remembering advice. So information needs to be provided in a different way. What is their learning style? What is their communication style? Maybe they need visual explanations. Maybe they need simplified and accessible material. They might have difficulty describing or stating or remembering their decision. So once a decision is made, having that written down in a way that's easy to share with others is one way to also promote and support their ability for advocating for their decisions and having an impact on the world once those decisions are made. It also might be the case that you make a decision about going in a particular direction in life, living in a certain area, taking on a certain job, going along with that is some skill development. So another way to support decision making is to ensure that we're there to help them build the skills that they need in order to experience and enjoy the results of their decision making. So we always want to ask ourselves, as a case manager or service coordinator, what can we do to help promote the person's use of their voice and to clarify their choice? We need to learn their unique communication style, the way they communicate expressively, or what their receptive language skills are, and use that when we're designing supports, so that others can really hear their voice and let all of us know what their choice is. Then include those choices into this individual service agreement or the care plan by using person-centered practices. So let's cover some of those key practices. So we're promoting the idea of making sure that a person has as many choices as possible. That means having control and being empowered in your life. But when we're talking about choices, it's more than just the standard definition. Choice alone is simply described as selecting an option from available alternatives, right? The fact is that if we don't have any information about those alternatives, we don't really, we have more of a dilemma than anything else, right? So imagine if, for example, you were invited by your friends to go out to dinner, and you get a text from them and they'd like to go out to dinner with you. They're planning on going to 3 restaurants and they're new locations in Manchester, and you haven't heard of these restaurants before. You see the name, you haven't seen the menu, you haven't seen Yelp reviews, you haven't talked to anybody who's tried those restaurants before. Your friends are saying, which one would you like? We want to get your vote. What are you going to do in that situation? No information about what it might be like that would match with your preferences. So you tend to defer. You say, I don't care, you guys better decide. How often does that happen with people we support, where they say, oh, it doesn't really matter? Actually, it does matter. The fact is they don't have the information necessary to make a choice. So you defer to others, you give up your power. Let's imagine you go to that restaurant, you find that it's a huge menu. You have to read through the whole thing and you have to decide what you're going to eat, right? So you have to spend some time reading through everything, and people are waiting for you, and you can't make your decision until you really evaluate. We also need support in terms of having enough time to process and also information to access to really make the decision. It can be a lot of pressure. So again, if you don't have a lot of information, or if you're not supported to have the time to process and the information given to you in a way that's accessible to you, you're presented with a dilemma. What we want to do in promoting choice is promoting informed choice. Informed choice, it means making a decision based on a full understanding of the relevant information, including potential risks, benefits, and alternatives. So it requires access to clear and accurate and unbiased information, as well as the time and support needed to process and consider that information. So this is particularly important, informed choice, when you're talking about some of the big decisions in your life, right? So what are the key elements of informed choice? First of all, information. So information provided to a person with the facts and options in an understandable way. The second element, understanding, ensuring that the person comprehends the information. 3 is voluntariness, allowing the person to make the decision without pressure or without coercion. And finally, support, offering assistance if needed to help the person evaluate what those options are. So to recap, informed choice empowers the person to make decisions that are significant and personally relevant in their lives. It emphasizes dignity, independence, and respect. Supporting informed choice also means paying attention to whether or not the alternatives available are actually desirable or have value to the person. Not all choices are meaningful. So if this option simply is you can stay at home or you can go to this program that we have designed for you, that's not a preferable choice, right? That's this or that. Um, so we have an obligation to provide the person with options. That's our role as case managers. Provide them with options and provide education on those options so that they can make their own decision. The choice should be one that reflects that person's values, their interest, their unique desires. And education on the choice should be informative, but it shouldn't be leading. Remember, it's the person's choice. So our responsibility in carrying out that role is to stay accountable by regularly assessing whether or not we're maximizing and really looking at as many opportunities for choice making as possible, making sure that it actually has all of those elements of informed choice, right? That's what we want to be making sure is there. That we're documenting that informed choice was happening, right? So that in retrospect, a person can then reflect on the decisions they made and evaluate and learn from them. That documentation helps with that reflection process. But also, one of our responsibilities also includes staying up to date and building these skills. So having training opportunities, accessing training about how to support someone in informed decision-making and informed choice-making is a professional responsibility, professional development. So you have a role as a case manager or service provider um, to promote self-advocacy and choice. You support autonomy and independence. You promote and encourage the person to become more empowered in decision-making. You are key in creating opening up opportunities for the person to express and give voice to their preferences and to learn more about the options, right, that they have in their life, as well as the services and supports that they have. You have a key responsibility as a case manager in ensuring you have a key responsibility as a case manager or service coordinator in promoting self-advocacy and choice. So let's review them. There's compliance with state and federal laws, right? New Hampshire, there's a New Hampshire state law that describes our services and developmental services, which is RSA 171A. Service coordinators and case managers have to comply with those revised statutes, particularly those governing the services around service coordination, but also with service provision. There's the Medicaid and federal rules. Service coordinators and case managers have to ensure that people receive services in accordance with the Medicaid guidelines. That includes the HCBS, or Home and Community-Based Services regulations. And those dictate the types of service that are available to the person. There's also the Americans with Disabilities Act. Service coordinators and case managers have to advocate for the rights of the person to prevent discrimination and ensure that there's access to services, job training, work opportunities, employment, medical services, healthcare, and so on. There's also the regulations around Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA. That covers all of us, right? But it also means that we're listening to the person about their decisions and their choice around who they think they should share their private information with. There's also the mandatory reporting rules in New Hampshire. All citizens in New Hampshire are mandatory reporters, but service coordinators and case managers have unique access to information where you might suspect abuse, neglect, or exploitation, and you have some responsibilities to report that. You also have responsibilities around person-centered planning. Case managers and service coordinators are required to facilitate those plans for the person, ensuring their preferences, choice, and needs are really central to the service planning process. Plans should be updated regularly and reflect the evolving needs and desires of the person. Also, with regard to access to services and resources, case managers ensure that a person has access to the necessary services, including healthcare, education, housing, job training. They also help coordinate these services and ensure that they're delivered on a timely and appropriate way. You also have responsibility around informed consent. So case managers ensure that a person or their legal guardians are fully informed about their rights, the services available, and any changes to the care plan. Consent should be obtained for services and treatment and interventions. And then finally, advocacy. Case managers and service coordinators have a legal obligation to advocate on behalf of the person, ensuring that they receive fair treatment and access to services. That includes helping the person and their families navigate the appeals process, if necessary, when services are denied or disputed. As a case manager in New Hampshire, your legal and ethical responsibility to the people you serve include ensuring access to appropriate services, advocating for their rights, maintaining confidentiality, and promoting self-determination. These are all written into the state and federal laws that we just covered. Your work should be guided by a commitment to respect, empower, and protect others while also helping them to be included with dignity in the larger community. You're ethically bound to respect the dignity, rights, and self-determination of people. You honor their choices and preferences, even when those choices may differ from professional recommendations, including your own recommendations. You maintain the confidentiality of the people by sharing information only with people they authorize you to share it with, or entities that you authorize to share it with, in accordance with their preferences. You advocate for the rights and the best interests of the person, ensuring that their voices are heard in all matters of their care, on all matters of their services. As an ethical case manager, you empower the person to make decisions about their lives and actively support their inclusion and participation in the community. You demonstrate cultural competence and sensitivity, their unique cultural traditions, and their unique journey and desire to participate in their cultural traditions and identify with different traditions. With their diverse backgrounds and needs of the person, you're respecting their culture, linguistic and personal differences, and you really are ensuring that there's equitable access to services. You're also responsible for continually improving your own knowledge and skills. That's the professional development side of your responsibilities. This includes staying informed about any kind of changes, staying informed about best practices as they evolve over time, and access and make sure you're connecting with new resources. And some of those resources, you want to make sure that they're connected to the person, so they're also aware of their rights and responsibilities, but are knowledgeable about any changes of those over time. You engage in an ethical decision-making process with them in a way that remains transparent, it's honest, it's fair in all of the interactions with the person that you support and all of the interactions with the families of the person you support, and also in all of your interactions with the support providers that they've chosen. You avoid situations where your personal interest or relationships could compromise the quality of service delivery or create a conflict of interest. So if there's situations where you might have a business relationship with someone who is connected with one of the options a person is presented with, or if you have a family relationship with some of the options that are presented to the person, that reveals a potential conflict of interest. So you need to not be involved in those decisions, move somebody else into it so they're getting support in a way that's unbiased. So we just covered how your role as a case manager promotes self-advocacy and choice. We've also touched on the state and federal laws describing your key responsibility in promoting self-advocacy and choice. So now let's take some time to explore how the principles of self-determination and autonomy are at the core of your work as a case manager. So with regard to person-centered practices, service planning, one of those, that key responsibility that you have is to work in carrying out that process with the person in a way that's shared responsibility, right? And you're making sure that that's done in a way that's really has a foundation in self-determination and autonomy. The steps that you take to put the person at the center of their own service planning and their own care planning. Your priority as a case manager must be to ensure that the plan reflects the person's unique goals, preferences, and choice, and not simply a predetermined design or set of one-size-fits-all solutions or alternatives. This aligns with the person's autonomy by respecting their right to make decisions about their life and the services that they receive. You facilitate and support a person-centered approach. Case managers do that by helping to empower the person to actively participate in the decision-making process, and that fosters greater self-determination. A key responsibility of case managers is to advocate for the person's rights and ensure that their voices are heard. This advocacy directly supports self-determination because it ensures that they are able to make informed decisions and are not excluded from the choices about their care and their daily life. As a case manager, you empower the person by providing information, guidance, and support to them and informed decisions about everything from daily life to long-term goals. By providing information that's clear and understandable, you ensure that the person feels confident and supported in asserting their autonomy. Self-determination requires that a person has the ability to make choices based on a full understanding of the options available to them. Informed consent is a process that ensures the person understands the implications of any decision that they make regarding their care. Case managers are legally and ethically responsible for ensuring that a person understands their rights, options, and any potential risks, and that they provide consent voluntarily. This respects their autonomy by ensuring that they are in control of decisions about their own lives. At the heart of self-determination is the right of the person to make choices about their own lives. Case managers are ethically required to respect the wishes of the person, even if those choices may differ from those that you might recommend. Case managers support autonomy by honoring the person's personal preferences about where they live, how they spend their time, and what types of services or supports they receive. You ensure that the person is not coerced into decisions, but instead is allowed to make choices that reflect their personal values and their personal desires. Self-determination involves the ability to live and participate in the community as independently as possible. Case managers have a responsibility to connect the person with resources that are within the community that promotes independence. Resources such as job training, education, social events and activities, and healthcare. By ensuring access to services and facilitating community integration, case managers help a person to exercise their autonomy in their communities. This not only supports independence, but also ensures that the person is able to be active a member in the society. That helps them to further reinforce their self-determination. Protecting a person's privacy is an essential aspect of respecting their autonomy. If a person is to make autonomous decisions about their life, they have to feel secure in the knowledge that their personal information will be kept confidential and shared only when necessary and only with those that they give consent to share it with. Case managers uphold confidentiality standards, for example, the ones that we described with HIPAA, to ensure that the person has control over their personal information and can share it on their own terms. This protection fosters trust and allows the person to make decisions about their lives without fear of unwanted exposure. Self-determination emphasizes the person's right to make decisions about their life, and autonomy is fostered when the case manager ensures that the person is not only involved in decision-making, but is also equipped with the skills and resources to make informed choices. Case managers must work to ensure that the person has the tools and supports they need to make decisions. This may include providing educational resources, helping the person understand their options, and supporting them through the decision-making process, one that aligns with their personal values and interests. Self-determination is directly connected to the ability to exercise basic human rights, including the right to be treated with dignity and respect. Ethical case managers advocate for these rights and work to ensure that the people are not discriminated against or treated as if they are incapable of making decisions for themselves. The legal and ethical responsibilities of case managers and service coordinators in New Hampshire directly align with and support self-determination, and autonomy by ensuring access to person-centered planning, promoting informed decision-making, respecting personal choices, and advocating for rights. Case managers empower people to take control of their lives and live as independently as possible. This holistic support not only ensures compliance with legal and ethical standards, but most importantly, it fosters the values of dignity, independence, and self-directed living that are at the core of self-determination. So self-determination and autonomy can happen only when we all work together to make sure that the person's voice and choice matter. As case managers, when we conduct ourselves in a way that honors the voice of the person and the choices that they make, it promotes higher quality of life and simply a better life for the person and a life that they want. It increases the person's satisfactions with services and supports. Good services make you feel good. Great services make you feel heard. It encourages the person to self-advocate and speak up for themselves. It reduces the risk of dependency, where the person feels like they always have to ask someone for something, when instead they might be able to manage on their own or with minimal assistance. So the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services is the entity within the Federal Department of Health and Human Services that establishes the rules. They provide oversight for how Medicaid funding is used by states in creating programs and community-based supports. Those CMS rules are very specific in dictating and identifying how services are designed and put together. They were recently updated in 2014, where there was much more specificity and clarity around how a person should be able to live a life that they have experience in connection with community and live in homes that really feel like their own in a way that anyone else would experience in society. So these includes very specific references to what a home feels like. So a person, we all experience home in a way in which we choose where we want to live. We live in different towns and cities in New Hampshire. We choose each one of those options, right? Based on what are the aspects that most align with our preferences and interests. So a person who is supported to live in homes that are funded through HCBS Medicaid funding in New Hampshire need to have the option of making choices, informed choices about where they live, about who lives with them, and about how they visit with friends whenever they want to. That is a right of theirs in the homes that they choose. They choose the providers, the people who provide supports to them. And of course, they choose case managers. Those need to be informed choices. They also have a right to access food whenever they're hungry. They have a right to secure their belongings under a lock and key. They have a right to enter into an agreement where if they're living in a home that belongs to somebody else, they have a written agreement where they have the protections of tenant law for anyone who lives in New Hampshire. And they have that role, they have that position of being in control and deriving how their individual service agreement comes together and how their care plan comes together and how they would like you as a case manager or service coordinator to support them in that process. And they also have a right to self-direct their services. So all of these are rights to decision-making, rights to autonomy, rights to self-determination that you play a significant and important role in as a case manager or service coordinator. So the rules require a person-centered process for planning HCBS, which means that the person receiving services directs the planning process, and the plan reflects their own preferences and goals that they set for themselves. So this is a list of the different rules within New Hampshire that have been updated to align with the settings rule, that 2014 update to the HCBS rules. And you can see each one of these are specific to the different kind of services that may be put into place. There's the HEM 310 around the rights of people in community residences, HEM 503 around eligibility in the process of providing services, establishing an operating area agency, HEM 504 how providers and provider agencies operate. So we recommend that each one of you take a look at these new rules as they have been updated. And with these new lenses, there's no way of looking at them and asking the question, where is their choice showing up here? What are the role and responsibility I have to make sure that's an informed choice process? And how can I do that with intentionality? So earlier, we covered the roles and how they align with self-determination. One was how you work with the person to ensure that there's tools and supports that are needed in place for them to help them make decisions and connecting them with resources. So there's different ways that we can support self-advocacy, both as an individual capacity. It's something that every individual, all of us, want to experience self-advocacy in our lives. But also, we need to recognize that self-advocacy is a movement. So there are a lot of resources. There's organizations that form around self-advocacy made up of people who experience services that can be great resources for people. And your role as a case manager or service coordinator to connect them with those resources is an important relationship that you can have with the person. So one way of supporting self-advocacy is knowledge, right? You can't exercise your rights unless you're aware of them. So what are the different ways that you can connect a person with resources like books or videos or workshops, interactive workshops, where someone can learn about what their rights are? Rights as disability rights, rights around workplace accommodations, rights that we all experience as citizens of the state of New Hampshire or citizens in the United States. A lot of self-advocacy groups create resources and have them available on websites. So you can watch YouTube videos or other training videos that are presented in simple language and accessible language, oftentimes presented by peers. So these are great resources for people to access. So teaching about individual rights is the first step. Another method of supporting self-advocacy that you should consider is just how this shows up in terms of teaching moments or learning opportunities in ongoing interaction. So the people we support are folks with labels, oftentimes with intellectual disability or acquired brain disorders or acquired brain injuries. These are often folks who are marginalized or have lowered expectation, who have been protected from access to decision-making or asserting their rights. They might have a diminished life experience as a result, so they're not expected to express their opinion. So some ways that we can turn that around is as we're hearing people forming opinions and wanting to express their desires or choices, is encouraging them to actually state that using an I statement. So I feel this, I want this, I make a decision about that. Someone might be hesitant in actually asserting those opinions. So give permission. I'm hearing that you're saying this. Why don't you use an I statement? You can say, I feel this way, and I'll listen to it. So you're creating safe moments and prompting and promoting their ability to really speak in an assertive way. Also, thirdly, just increasing opportunities and moments of decision-making and stepping back and really analyzing and reflecting on day-to-day interactions. Are there opportunities for a person to make a choice and assert their voice? So making sure those opportunities are carved out and there's time available and support available for them to make those decisions. Also, sometimes you want to be thinking about when somebody makes a decision to congratulate, to celebrate. Hey, you made a decision? That's really great. We're going to be moving forward with that. Congratulations, right? Celebrating small successes, celebrating the actual experience of, hey, you decided this. This is great. What a great choice. So people are encouraged to move forward and do that again, right? The other thing that can encourage self-advocacy and decision-making is helping somebody learn to realize that their decisions sometimes can be broken into small steps. Some decisions in our life, healthcare, where we live, and so on, There are a series of small steps. And when you think about the big decision making, it can feel overwhelming. It's not unusual for someone to say, I can't think about that right now. That's just too much. But if it's a medical process, remember that you can remind the person that's a series of small decisions. We don't have to, we're not deciding about the whole medical procedure right now. We just have an appointment next Tuesday. These are the questions that we're going to ask the doctor. We're going to get these answers, and then we're going to sit down and think about and decide what the next step is. So encouraging somebody to think about and getting support for step-by-step components of a bigger decision-making process can make that all more doable and also more satisfactory for the person as they move through it. Another element around supporting self-advocacy is just connecting people with peer groups, right? People who are affinity groups, people who have walked in their shoes before. That's one of the important elements of support that we talk about in charting the life course. In charting the life course, there's this concept of the 3 buckets of support. So when families or individuals talk about what real good support feels like, it comes in 3 forms. One is support that involves training and education, understanding, learning about what's going on, what the support system is, knowing more about what's going on for me, having more information, right? So information and training is one bucket, supporting people that way. The second bucket is supporting people by helping them connect with affinity groups, people who have walked in their shoes before. If you are able to connect with other people who have similar kind of struggles with decision making and can get encouraged and can hear about what their experiences are as they went through that process, you feel more confident about it, right? So being part of self-advocacy groups is another way of really powerfully filling that second bucket. The third bucket, by the way, is goods and services, right? Those that can be provided through systems, formal systems of support. So those 3 buckets of support, when you fill all 3 of those for someone, you're really touching on all of the key elements. So connecting with peer groups, connecting with People First of New Hampshire, connecting with some national groups, and there are other smaller groups that are forming over time. This is really a great way to encourage and support someone in their self-advocacy experiences. And finally, there are a number of new tools that are coming up and being available electronically, something that someone can access as apps on their phone or can access from their iPad that can really help with some decisions. So there are resources out there that are worthy of investigating. They're more accessible literally because they can be in your pocket and can really just sort of help you process through the different decisions that you make. Sometimes it's a matter of just typing it in. So think about using the Apple Notes feature, right? So when somebody can write that information down in a way that they can take a look at and record over time. It's a way of journaling through a decision-making process. So when we use the term self-determination, we mean that it's the person's right to participate in and approve of the design of their personal support systems. It's the right to fully engage in their communities, and it's the right to make choices in their daily life. So the philosophy of self-determination underscores the importance of maximizing their control over their life. That philosophy of self-determination is the underpinning of your work as a case manager. To work in partnership with the person that you serve, to give the support that they say they need to facilitate their own person-centered planning process and to create their own individual service agreement or their care plan. So it's really about a shift in perspective, isn't it? As we work in partnership with the person that we're supporting and creating their ISA, we look at the world from their point of view. It's their life. Let's see it through their eyes. Let's hear their voice and their choice. Their ISA meeting is the great place to advocate, right? The design of the plan itself helps to reform that, to reinforce that perspective. It includes their desires, their hopes, dreams, personal life goals, preferences, and strengths. Those are in the ISA. You learn these through conversations, through the discovery process. It includes their vision of a good life and their plan to take them into the future. It's their life, so we listen to their voice to assist them in making their choices. So the individual service agreement or care plan is what makes it possible for us to provide home and community-based services in New Hampshire. It's the core document of the written details of the services, the activities, and the resources required for the person to achieve their personal goals. It's their plan. And the important parts of that person's written agreement, that service agreement, should have a focus on what's important to them, but also list the things that might be important for them. So what's important to them are those things in life which help them to be satisfied and content, comforted, fulfilled, and happy. It includes people to be with, the relationships they have, their culture, their identity, things that give them purpose and meaning, things that give them status and control, things to do, the places they go. These are all important in our lives, and they're unique to each one of us. Our rituals and routines, the rhythm and pace of life are all unique to each one of these. So knowing what those things are and identifying them, writing them down, learning from the person, verifying your assumptions that you form over time, and always keeping that updated, that's an important part of the listening process. Listening so that you're really including that information in the ISA. So you're promoting their self-determination and autonomy. What's important for the person includes the person's health and safety needs and what we understand to be the priorities to ensure that someone is a valued member of the community. So at times you'll need to assist in making sure that this is an understanding that there must be a balance between the important 2 and 4. They both have to be present in a balanced way. But it's an important element of really supporting self-determination so that their ISA or their care plan reflects their choices. So as a case manager, you're facilitating that person-centered planning process, and that includes mobilizing and helping people enroll a number of folks who can be part of their team to help them through the process of building their individual service agreement and their care plan. You help the person choose who they would like to be part of that team. So they decide who is going to be participating. They decide who is not going to be participating. That's going to change over the course of life. There's different people, just as we were talking about how decision-making changes, becomes stronger over time, and also different phases of your life, you turn to different combinations of people for advice and support. So they choose who's part of their team, and you need to be listening in partnership with the person, listening to them so that only those folks are included, so they feel ownership and control over their planning process. So the agreement itself results in outcomes that maintain skills, that promote independence or change services and supports to reflect what's important to and what's important for them in their daily life, right? So supported decision-making is a process that allows a person to really make their own choices about their life with the help of a trusted network of supporters. Through supported decision-making, a person identifies what type of decisions they need help with. The person chooses others that they trust to help them understand, make, and communicate those decisions. So we talked about informed choice. A supported decision-making process should result in a written agreement, something that really documents and writes down how somebody would like to get support. Who do they trust to help them? So important decisions in their life, like medical decisions or financial decisions, can really benefit from a careful process of exploring a supported decision-making agreement where you listen to what the person wants, you identify what the person is capable of on their own with regard to this decision, and what dimensions of this kind of decision-making process they would ask other people to participate in those decision-making with them. So who are their trusted folks, and how that support will be provided. So is it sitting down with them and going over it? Is it talking on the phone? Is it texting? There's different ways that a person feels most comfortable in getting support around a decision. So a decision-making agreement or plan is written down to really document how they have chosen who will be providing it and how they would like the support to be offered. A written supported decision-making agreement can help the person legally designate which supporters will help them make which decisions. It can be an alternative to guardianship. Supported decision-making is always flexible in how it is applied for one person to another, and even how it is applied to the same person, rather, over time. So we compare this to guardianship. Guardianship has often been a traditional way of thinking about how someone who may have some challenges, difficulties making a set of decisions in, say, financial areas or healthcare decisions, where somebody is identified to meet with the court, meet with a judge, and bring along a professional assessment about how the person's skills are challenged in this particular area, and ask the judge to appoint them as a guardian. And then the person becomes a ward of that guardian. The guardian then makes decisions for the person. If the person disagrees with those decisions, the only way that they can change that is actually go back to the judge and ask for a change in guardianship or a change in decision. The alternative is supported decision-making agreements. Supported decision-making evolved out of in the 90s, actually started in Canada and became more popular across the United States over time. It's a way of really identifying specifically, again, where somebody needs support, where they have strengths, and what kind of support they need. It's one, if you look here on the left side of the slide, the person is involved in choices all along the way. They can also change the agreement whenever they want. If they don't agree with the decisions that another person is advising them on, they don't have to follow through on that. But it's a way to step in. For example, let's say somebody starts a job and they're now getting a $1,200 paycheck every 2 weeks. And they've never had experience in the past with using their own money. So that kind of experience may have been limited in their history. So this is a new thing for them. They have a lot of money. Traditionally, that oftentimes people who care for that person may be alarmed and say, oh my gosh, they don't have any experience with this. The reflexive response may be, do they need a guardian? But if we're using a person-centered practice and we're thinking about supported decision-making, we're going to ask a different set of questions. So we're going to ask, with regard to this $1,200 or money in general, where are they independent? So we might have the answer to that question to be, the person is actually pretty independent with spending cash up to $25. So cash in the pocket, going to the Irving station or the CVS or the local grocery store, they buy their own things. After conversation, the rest of the money, they would like savings or what have you. So the $25 cash in the pocket, no support is necessary. They're on their own. But maybe they decide that for amounts between 25 and 500, let's say, more money, more potential for concern, that they decide they would like their brother to help them. So they designate their brother as they're going to be called on to help them process, to evaluate options, to figure out, weighing consequences and so on, in order to get that, move towards that decision. It's also specified how the brother will be involved. So will they be personally sitting next to them? Is that the best way for them to receive information? Or can you just talk on the phone, processing? But also you might there also needs to be some specificity with regard to when those decisions are best supported. So we all make decisions at different times in our life, different times of the week, different times of the day, where it's better to make a decision in one day than another, or time of day than another. So that can be put into the supported decision-making agreement as well. My example that I've used in my own life is my mom, who was in assisted living, and she lived to the age of 97. The last few years of her life, she was more forgetful, so she acquired disabilities over time. And we wanted to figure out a way in which one of her sons or daughters, I have one brother and one sister, could be there to help her make decisions so she'd still have control over that. And so the way that someone would be present, we decided my sister would be with her. But my sister lived in Washington State. But it worked if mom specified to her doctors and her nurses, if they were going to provide her with information where she was needing to make a decision about medical care, that my sister would be called, she would be put on speakerphone, and she'd hear the same information at the same time. And then further, the support was specified that mom wouldn't make a decision then, but until there was a follow-up call with my sister, they'd process it more. And then mom's decision was written down in a way that would be honored by the nurse and doctor. So it was still mom in control of those decisions. We also made sure that that kind of decision-making support, or any kind of decisions at all, wouldn't be happening after 12 o'clock, because mom was better at making those decisions in the morning. In the afternoon, she got more tired and more forgetful. So the supported decision-making plan should be specific and with regard to the conditions that are optimal for the person to receive the support or the person to make decisions on their own. So similarly, you might want to build in that alternative, that supported decision-making plan, where if there's making decisions about money, it involves a lot more money, you can bring in more resources. So the person may want to access a financial planner for decisions of money purchases over 500 or contracts. So that can be blocked into that decision-making agreement as well. Courts are starting to acknowledge that supported decision-making is a good way of building in agreements, sometimes in combination with guardianship. So there is now case law, and judges can reference other kind of decisions, so that supported decision-making agreements can be part of the ongoing support plan for someone. So these kind of agreements are really important and really valuable for some of the big decision-making components in somebody's life, their healthcare decisions, their money decisions, or deciding where they're going to live, deciding who their home providers are. Can those be put together in a supported decision-making agreement? Who would the person like to be with them in making those choices, and how would they like to receive that advice, and how would they like to receive that support? Many choices in life involve risk. In promoting voices and choices of the people we support as case managers, we recognize that the ability to take risks, it's essential really for personal dignity and self-esteem. So this is a concept of dignity of risk. The concept challenges that traditional approach of overprotection, advocating instead for a balance between safety and the person's right to live their life as they choose. So upholding this concept involves actions on our part. We provide information, helping the person understand their options in a clear, accessible way. We respect their preferences, taking time to learn their likes and dislikes and communication styles to support true decision-making. We use communication aids when needed, so there's accessible information, right, that we talked about. We create opportunities for choice, especially when that's not regularly offered. We want to maximize the opportunities for those. We listen with our ears, we listen with our eyes to really understand. So honoring the choices of the person that we support needs to become a priority at all levels of our system of care. In order to do so, we need to acknowledge the barriers that exist and think through those strategies to reduce or eliminate them. So raising awareness through training on rights. This includes offering guidance on laws that, like the Americans with Disability Act, or providing some trainings around some of the milestones that really maximize people's choice and their rights to live in the community. For example, the Olmstead decision or historical Americans with Disabilities Act. This helps to elevate our understanding and respect for the importance of choice. We make sure that choices are fully understandable and accessible, right? Really doing that inventory and reflection, making sure they're maximized. How many moments are there where we can actually step back and make sure this is a choice the person can make? What kind of support do they need to understand the options? And how can we honor those decisions going forward? And connecting people with peer and advocacy groups can help address some of the obstacles that are there. Streamlining our policies and procedures. So it's very important that we support a dignity of risk, but we also need to be very clear If we're going to say that a direct support staff person is going to support dignity of risk, what are the steps they need to do? That's their core responsibility. And as long as those are in place, we're not going to be blaming them, right, for some outcomes that are going to happen. So that has to be really clear so people feel honored and protected as direct support staff to really support somebody making their own decisions and dealing with those consequences. We can provide workshops and create discussion groups for caregivers so that they can learn about the importance of honoring autonomy. And making sure and understanding that even when choices differ with their own recommendations, we're supporting that choice. Advocating for the need for new resources for the people, resources in the community, accessible opportunities. This helps break down those barriers to making decisions. So we're always listening in order to support self-advocacy and choice, and listening involves both our ears and our eyes. There are other ways to communicate that don't involve spoken language, right? Learning to understand what's being communicated, especially when the person uses a communication style that's different than others. Learning to identify how they say yes or no, enlisting another supporter to really get different views and understanding of how the person expresses themselves. Setting long-term goals with a person requires a thoughtful, person-centered approach that considers their strengths and interests and needs. So here are a few things to keep in mind. All person-centered practices are based on relationships of trust. It takes time to build that relationship. And the person needs to learn that you'll listen, be honest, and act on what you hear. Designing goals starts with spending time understanding the person's personality, preferences, and communication style. We want to think about what needs to happen to create a safe environment where they feel comfortable expressing themselves, right? And we always use a strength-based approach by highlighting their abilities and interests as the foundation for their goals, using life maps or goal boards or drawing activities to help the person visualize their positive future. There are different ways and different systems to use like that that we can learn about. And goal setting is a process, encouraging a person to think about what they'd like to achieve in their future. It might be living independently, learning a skill or a hobby, or working on a specific job. We want to think about ways to ensure that the goals that do emerge are aligned with the person's abilities while also encouraging growth. Breaking long-term goals into smaller, achievable steps it involves building a momentum, right? Confidence, and we can celebrate small successes. Providing clear communication that's clear in jargon-free language, using visual aids that explain concepts. These are all ways that we can make choice-making more accessible. We can relate goals to activities that they already enjoy or participate in. We can encourage decision-making at every stage, from brainstorming to action planning. We want to emphasize the person's role as the leader of their own goal-setting process. And as we design the individual service agreement or care plan, you'll identify who will provide that support and how, whether it's a family member, professional, or friend. You'll also think about ways to connect them with local organizations, programs, or accessing tools and strategies. You'll monitor progress and adjust goals over time, recognizing milestones and boosting their motivation and self-esteem, celebrating those milestones as they move forward, reassessing strategies if obstacles arise so that you can adapt goals over time, scheduling consistent follow-ups to really stay on track of changes that are needed. And remember that we want to adopt a growth mindset. Let the person know that that's when setbacks happen, that's a natural part of the learning process, natural part of life, right? Reinforcing their ability to learn, grow, and achieve over time. So we've covered a lot. We've talked about the difference between informed choice and choice. We've described the legal and ethical responsibilities of case managers and service coordinators, and how that aligns with self-determination and autonomy. We've identified how to advocate and provide strategies to encourage self-advocacy skills. We've defined how to ensure that the person's choice is included in their person-centered planning process. We've described supported decision-making. And we've talked about obstacles and strategies to overcome them. The bottom line of our training today is the person's needs and wants must be the biggest part of decision making. They should have a chance to live a life that encourages growth, learning, and participation in new activities. They should be able to make decisions and choices, and they should be involved in decision-making process, even if they have a guardian. So here's some resources that we've referenced and might be helpful as you build your strategies over time. You can see here in the middle, there's National Resource Center for Supported Decision-Making. That's a great website that will really get you connected with techniques and efforts around the country in different states. You can also see that the ACLU and the American Bar Association has some specific links to supported decision-making. The Autism Self-Advocacy Network has a great set of resources and a great place to learn. And there's the Center for Youth Voice, Youth Choice. So we recommend all of those. And there are two resources that are available through the Bureau of Developmental Services and the Bureau for Aging and Adult Services. Two documents there that have some nice information on your responsibilities and supporting choice and decision-making. And here's some references, some fact sheets about the final rule or the settings rule. So you can find that at those links. And then there's some information there on the great resources that are provided by the Disability Rights Center of New Hampshire. They have a great piece in their newsletter that was produced in February of 2021. So there's a link to that newsletter. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this. Good luck.